Have you ever stared at an email that simply says, "We decided to move forward with another candidate," and felt something inside you quietly break? I did. 10 times. 10 job interviews in the United States, 10 polite rejections. On the 10th night, sitting alone in a small apartment, I asked myself a question that scared me. Was moving to America the biggest mistake of my life, or the beginning of the story that would change everything? The day I almost gave up. One night in America, I opened my laptop and saw an email that began with a very polite sentence, "Thank you for your interest in the position." If you have ever applied for jobs in the United States, you probably know what comes next. The sentence continues in a calm, professional tone. The words are soft. The grammar is perfect. But the meaning is simple. No. That email was rejection number 9. 9 interviews. 9 polite no messages. 9 small reminders that chasing a dream in a new country is much harder than it looks in movies. Outside my apartment window, the street was quiet. A tall streetlight painted the sidewalk in soft yellow light. A cold evening wind moved through the trees. Somewhere far away, a car passed slowly, its tires humming on the road. Life in America can look very peaceful like that. Calm streets. Organized buildings. Friendly neighbors who smile and say, "Good evening." But inside your mind, things can feel very different. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The apartment was small but clean. A simple table. A laptop. A coffee mug that had already gone cold. This was not the life I imagined when I first arrived in the United States. When my plane landed months earlier, everything felt exciting. Airports in America are huge. The highways seem endless. The buildings look exactly like the ones in movies. Even small things felt interesting. The first time I entered an American supermarket, I spent almost 30 minutes just walking around. There were so many choices. Different kinds of bread. Dozens of cereal boxes. Coffee everywhere. People moved quickly but politely. Someone bumped into me once and immediately said, "Oh, sorry about that." I smiled and answered, "It's okay." Simple English. Small conversation. But moments like that made me feel hopeful. At that time, I believed something very simple. If I worked hard, I would find a good job. Reality arrived quickly. My first job interview happened 2 weeks after I landed in the country. I remember the building clearly. Tall glass windows. Bright white lights in the lobby. A quiet elevator ride to the 10th floor. When the hiring manager came out to greet me, he smiled and said, "Hi. Nice to meet you." That part was easy. "Nice to meet you too," I replied. Then we sat down. The interview started normally. "Tell me a little about yourself." This is a classic American interview question. Very common. Very simple. But something interesting happens to your brain when you are nervous and speaking a second language. Your brain becomes slow. Inside my head, everything was translating word by word. Tell about yourself. 5 seconds passed before I started speaking. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said carefully. "My name is, and I recently moved to the United States." Not perfect English. But honest English. The interviewer nodded politely. He listened. He asked more questions. Some questions were easy. "What kind of work do you enjoy?" "I enjoy solving problems," I answered. Other questions were harder. "How do you handle pressure in the workplace?" My brain searched for vocabulary like someone looking for lost keys in the dark. Finally, I said something simple. "I stay calm and focus on one problem at a time." The interview ended with a handshake. "Thank you for coming in today," he said. "Thank you for your time," I replied. 2 days later, the email arrived. "Thank you for meeting with us. Rejection number 1. At first, I did not worry. Everyone gets rejected sometimes. That's normal. So I applied for more jobs. Every morning started the same way. Wake up early. Make coffee. Open the laptop. Search job websites. Click. Apply. Click. Apply. Click. Apply. Some days I sent 10 applications. Other days I sent 15. Weeks passed like this. Autumn slowly arrived in the city. The air became colder. Leaves on the trees turned orange, yellow, and deep red. American autumn is beautiful, but it also carries a quiet feeling. A feeling of waiting. Inside my apartment, I practiced English every day. Sometimes I read sentences out loud. Today will be a productive day. I am improving my English step by step. Speaking slowly helps your brain connect words and sounds. It may feel strange at first, but it works. Outside the apartment, I practiced listening. At the grocery store, the cashier often asked a question that confused me the first time I heard it. Paper or plastic? I froze. Paper? Plastic? What did that mean? Later I learned she was asking what type of bag I wanted. So the next time, I answered confidently. Plastic, please. Small victories matter more than people think. But interviews were still difficult. Interview number 3 took place in a busy downtown office. The interviewer spoke quickly, like many Americans do when they feel comfortable. At one moment he asked, "What motivates you?" That word again. Motivates. Big word. Instead of searching for perfect grammar, I answered simply. I like learning new things. And I like improving every day. He nodded. He smiled. 2 days later, another email arrived. Unfortunately. Rejection number 3. Then came number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Each email looked almost identical. Different company logos. Same polite language. We appreciate your interest. We enjoyed meeting you. We decided to move forward with other candidates. By rejection number 8, something inside me started changing. At first, I felt embarrassed. Then frustrated. Then tired. One afternoon I walked through a park near my apartment. The sky was gray. A man walked past me with a golden dog. A child rode a small bicycle while his mother laughed behind him. Life continued normally around me. But inside my mind, one quiet thought kept repeating. Maybe I'm not good enough. The 9th rejection arrived on a calm evening. I read the first 2 lines of the email and slowly closed the laptop. Outside the window, the street light turned on. The sky darkened into deep blue. For the first time since arriving in America, a dangerous thought appeared. Maybe this dream was too big. But life often hides turning points in very ordinary places. At that moment, I did not know that the next change in my story would not happen in an office. Not in another interview room. But in a small American coffee shop. And it would begin with the simplest sentence in the English language. Hi. Is this seat taken? Arriving in America with big dreams. The first weeks in America felt a little like stepping into a movie that you had watched many times before, but suddenly you were inside it. Everything looked familiar, yet strangely different. The streets were wider than I expected. Cars moved quietly through long avenues lined with trees. Coffee shops stood on almost every corner, glowing warmly in the cool morning air. People walked fast, holding paper cups and checking their phones. Life seemed organized, efficient, and calm. But inside my head, nothing felt calm at all. Because every sound around me was English. Real English. Not the slow English from textbooks. Not the clear English from classroom recordings. Real English is faster. Softer. Sometimes the words connect together like one long sentence. The first morning in my neighborhood, I walked into a small cafe. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. A barista smiled and said something quickly. "Hi there. What can I get started for you?" For a moment my brain froze. The sentence was simple, but the speed surprised me. So I asked politely, "Sorry, could you say that again?" She smiled again. Americans are usually patient when you ask them to repeat. "What would you like to drink?" This time I understood. "I'll have a small coffee, please." "Sure thing." Two simple words. Sure thing. That phrase became one of the first pieces of real English I learned in daily life. It simply means of course. Small discoveries like that happen everywhere in America. At the grocery store. At the bus stop. In elevators. One day an older man entered the elevator with me and said, "How's it going?" I smiled and answered, "Good, thank you." Later I realized something interesting. When Americans say, "How's it going?" they often do not expect a long answer. It's just a friendly greeting. Daily life slowly became my English classroom. But at the same time, the pressure of finding a job followed me everywhere. Every morning I woke up early. The sun in America rises gently through the window blinds. Thin lines of light fall across the floor. The apartment building becomes quiet as people leave for work. That quiet morning feeling became my routine. Coffee. Laptop. Job websites. Apply. At first I felt optimistic. America is known as a country of opportunity, right? So I believed opportunities would appear quickly. The first few rejections did not hurt much. Rejection number 1 felt like normal competition. Rejection number 2 felt like a small disappointment. But by the time rejection number 4 arrived, something different started happening. Each interview had its own strange little story. Interview number 2 took place in a modern office building with bright white walls. The interviewer spoke kindly but very quickly. He asked, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" This is a famous American interview question. Inside my head, I quickly translated it. 5 years, future, goals. I answered slowly. I hope to grow with the company and develop strong skills. The sentence sounded simple, but my heart was beating fast the entire time. 2 days later, another polite email arrived. Thank you for your interest. Rejection number 2. By interview number 4, I had learned something important. Perfect English is not necessary. Clear English is enough. During that interview, the manager asked, "What are your strengths?" I paused for a moment, then answered honestly. I am patient. I work hard. And I learn quickly. He nodded and wrote something on his notepad. The conversation felt comfortable. We even laughed once. For a brief moment I believed the job might be mine. But 3 days later, another familiar message appeared in my inbox. We decided to move forward with another candidate. Rejection number 4. Life outside my job search continued quietly. American neighborhoods are peaceful in the evenings. After sunset, many houses glow softly from inside. People walk their dogs along the sidewalks. Sometimes children ride bicycles in the street. I often walked around my neighborhood to clear my mind. Cold autumn air touched my face. Leaves covered the sidewalks like colorful paper. Walking helped me practice English too. I read street signs. Stop. School zone. Speed limit. Simple words everywhere. Sometimes I also practiced speaking quietly to myself. This is a beautiful neighborhood. The weather is getting colder. Speaking slowly helps your mouth and brain work together. It may feel strange, but it builds confidence. Interview number 6 happened on a rainy afternoon. The sky was gray and the office windows were covered with small drops of water. The interviewer asked a question I did not expect. What challenges have you faced since moving here? For a second, I thought carefully. Then I answered honestly. Listening to fast English is difficult sometimes. But I am improving every day. He smiled when he heard that. Honesty often connects people more than perfect grammar. Still, the result did not change. Another email. Another polite rejection. By the time rejection number 7 and 8 arrived, I had memorized the tone of those messages. They always start with gratitude. Thank you for applying. Then appreciation. We enjoyed meeting you. And finally the quiet ending. Unfortunately, rejection number 9 came on a chilly evening. The wind outside made the window shake slightly. I opened the email and read the first line. My shoulders dropped. For a long moment, I sat in silence. 9 interviews. 9 no answers. In that quiet apartment, I began to question everything. Was my English still not good enough? Was my experience not strong enough? Or maybe starting a new life in America was simply harder than I imagined. Outside the window, a few people walked past the streetlight. They laughed together as they headed toward a nearby restaurant. Life kept moving. But inside my apartment, time felt slower. That was the night I almost stopped believing in the dream that brought me to this country. What I did not know yet was that the next chapter of my story was already beginning. Not in an office. Not in a job interview. But in a place where many Americans spend their mornings. A warm little coffee shop. And one simple conversation there would slowly lead me toward rejection number 10, and something completely unexpected. My first interview disaster. Morning in America often begins very quietly. The sun rises slowly between buildings. Coffee shops open their doors early. People walk quickly along the sidewalks, holding warm cups and looking at their phones. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear the soft sound of traffic starting for the day. That morning felt exactly like that. Calm. Ordinary. Peaceful. But inside my chest, my heart was beating fast. Because that day was my very first job interview in the United States. I remember standing in front of the mirror in my small apartment, adjusting my shirt collar again and again. Everything needed to look right. In a new country, first impressions matter even more. I looked at myself and quietly practiced a few sentences. Hello, nice to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here. Speaking those lines out loud helped me relax. When learning English, saying simple sentences clearly is often better than trying to sound perfect. Outside, the morning air was cold and fresh. Autumn had already arrived. The trees along the street were changing colors, and dry leaves moved across the sidewalk when the wind passed. I walked to the bus stop with a folder in my hand. Inside the folder were copies of my resume. In America, people often call it a resume, not a CV. That was one of the first vocabulary differences I learned. When the bus arrived, the driver greeted passengers with a friendly voice. Good morning. I answered, good morning, and sat near the window. The city slowly moved past outside, tall buildings, small restaurants, people walking quickly to work. Everyone seemed busy. Everyone seemed confident. And I wondered quietly if I looked confident too, or if people could see the nervous thoughts running inside my mind. The office building where the interview took place was tall and modern. Glass walls reflected the bright morning light. Inside the lobby, everything felt clean, organized, and quiet. A receptionist sat behind a large desk. She smiled and said, "Good morning. How can I help you?" For a moment I felt relieved. That sentence was clear and easy to understand. I have an interview at 10 o'clock, I replied. Of course. Please take a seat. The hiring manager will be with you shortly. Another useful phrase. Shortly. It simply means soon. While waiting, I watched people walking through the lobby. Some carried laptops. Some talked quietly on their phones. Others walked quickly toward the elevators. Life in American offices often moves at a fast rhythm. A few minutes later, a man in a dark blue jacket approached me with a friendly smile. Hi. You must be here for the interview. Yes, that's right, I said, standing up quickly. Great, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. We shook hands. That small gesture felt important. Handshakes are common in American professional culture. A firm but friendly handshake shows confidence. Then we entered a meeting room. The room had large windows and a long table in the center. Sunlight fell across the surface, making everything feel bright and open. The interview began. Tell me a little about yourself, he said. This question appears in almost every interview in the United States. But something interesting happens when you hear a familiar question in real life. Your brain suddenly feels less prepared than you expected. Inside my head, words moved slowly. I began carefully. Thank you for inviting me today. I recently moved to the United States and I'm excited to continue developing my career. Not perfect. But clear. He nodded politely. Then came the second question. Can you describe your previous work experience? This one was slightly harder. The interviewer spoke naturally, quickly connecting words together. Previous work experience. When native speakers talk, words often blend together like that. I took a small breath before answering. In my previous role, I worked with a team and focused on solving customer problems. He listened and wrote something on his notepad. The conversation continued. What would you say are your strengths? I paused. Then I answered with simple honesty. I am patient, hardworking, and I enjoy learning new things. He smiled slightly. But then came a question that surprised me. How do you handle pressure at work? My brain froze. Pressure, handle, situation. For a few seconds, I searched for the right sentence. Finally I said slowly, when work becomes difficult, I stay calm and focus on one step at a time. The interviewer nodded again. The entire conversation lasted about 20 minutes. When it finished, he stood up and extended his hand again. Thank you for coming in today. Thank you for your time, I replied. Walking out of that building, I felt something strange. Relief. The interview was finished. I had survived my first professional conversation in real American English. Outside, the afternoon sun had warmed the streets. People sat outside cafes, talking and laughing. The city looked alive and comfortable. For a moment, hope returned. Maybe the interview went well. Maybe this would be the beginning. 2 days later, I opened my email. The message began politely. Dear applicant, thank you for meeting with us earlier this week. I already knew the ending before reaching the final sentence. We decided to move forward with another candidate. Rejection number 1. The first rejection always feels a little heavier than expected. But I told myself something simple. This is only the beginning. So I continued applying for more jobs. More interviews came. More conversations. More polite smiles. And slowly, 1 rejection turned into 2. 2 turned into 4. Then 6. Then 9. Each no felt slightly different, but the result was always the same. And yet, without realizing it, those early failures were teaching me something important. Not just about job interviews. But about real English. About patience. And about the strange journey of building a life in a completely new country. A journey that was far from finished. Because rejection number 10 was still waiting somewhere ahead. And strangely, it would lead me closer to my dream job than any success before it. 3 rejections in 1 week. There was a week in my early life in America that I still remember very clearly. Not because something wonderful happened, but because 3 small emails arrived, one after another, and quietly tested my confidence. Monday morning. The day began the way many days begin in the United States, calm and organized. The sunlight moved slowly across the buildings, and people hurried to work with coffee cups in their hands. From my apartment window, I could see a narrow street lined with trees. The leaves were turning orange and yellow. Autumn had settled into the city. Inside the apartment, my routine had already started. Coffee. Laptop. Job applications. Life in a new country quickly becomes a routine built around small habits. When you are looking for work, mornings become especially important. Your mind still feels fresh, hopeful. That morning I opened my email inbox. 1 new message. The subject line looked familiar. Update on your application. I already knew the tone of that phrase. Still, I opened the message slowly. Thank you for taking the time to interview with our team. A polite beginning. Then the next line. After careful consideration, we have decided to move forward with another candidate. Rejection number 7. For a moment I just stared at the screen. The words felt calm, professional, almost kind. But the meaning was clear. No. I closed the laptop and took a slow breath. Outside the window, life continued normally. A woman walked past with a small dog. A delivery truck stopped at the corner. The driver carried boxes into a nearby building. In America, everyday life moves forward whether you feel successful or not. That afternoon I went for a walk. Walking became one of my quiet habits during those months. It helped clear my mind, and it also helped me practice English in a natural way. Street signs are excellent teachers. Crosswalk. Parking only. Do not enter. Short words. Clear meanings. Sometimes I read them out loud in a soft voice while walking. Speed limit 25. It may sound strange, but reading aloud helps your brain connect sound and meaning. The next morning arrived quickly. Tuesday. Another quiet American morning. Sunlight through the blinds. The smell of fresh coffee filling the room. A few cars passing outside. I opened my laptop again. And there it was. Another email. The subject line almost looked identical to the previous one. Regarding your recent interview. My shoulders felt heavier this time. Still, I opened it. Thank you again for speaking with our team. We truly enjoyed learning about your experience. For 1 second, hope appeared. But the next line ended the story. Unfortunately, we will not be moving forward at this time. Rejection number 8. 2 rejections in 2 days. That evening I visited a small grocery store near my apartment. The store was warm and bright. Shelves were full of colorful packages. An employee walked past and smiled. How's it going? That sentence is very common in America. It means something like how are you? I answered automatically. Good, thanks. The interesting thing about small conversations is that they can change your mood slightly. Even a simple greeting reminds you that life is bigger than one difficult day. At the checkout counter, the cashier asked the usual question. Paper or plastic? This time I answered confidently. Plastic, please. Small English victories still happened every day. But the job search continued. Wednesday morning arrived with gray clouds outside the window. The sky looked heavy, like rain was coming. I already knew what my routine would be. Coffee. Laptop. Email. For a moment I considered waiting before checking the inbox. Maybe later would feel easier. But curiosity won. Click. One new message. Again. Thank you for your interest. I didn't even need to read the rest. Rejection number 9. 3 rejections in 3 days. Monday. Tuesday. Wednesday. If you had looked at my apartment that morning, nothing seemed dramatic. A quiet room. A laptop on a simple desk. A half-finished cup of coffee. But inside my mind, something felt different. When you hear no many times in a row, your brain begins to create quiet questions. Maybe my English is not good enough. Maybe my experience doesn't match what companies want. Maybe starting a new life in America was more difficult than I expected. Outside, rain finally began to fall. Small drops touched the window and slowly slid downward. Rainy days in American cities have a special atmosphere. The streets become quieter. People walk faster under umbrellas. Coffee shops fill with warm light. I decided to go out anyway. A short walk in the rain sometimes helps organize your thoughts. The sidewalk was shiny from the water. Cars moved slowly along the road. A bus passed with its headlights glowing through the gray air. As I walked, I repeated a simple English sentence quietly to myself. I will keep trying. Not a complicated sentence. Just honest. Learning English and building a life in a new country often works the same way. You repeat simple things. Again. And again. Step by step. By the time I returned to my apartment, the rain had slowed. I sat down at the desk and opened my notebook. On the first page I wrote something important. Rejections are not the end. At that moment, I still believed the story had already reached its hardest chapter. But I was wrong. Because somewhere ahead, rejection number 10 was waiting. And strangely, that rejection would lead me to the most important conversation of my life. A conversation that would begin with a simple question inside a warm American coffee shop. Hi, is anyone sitting here? The coffee shop conversation. Rain had stopped sometime during the night. The next morning, the streets looked freshly washed, as if the city had quietly reset itself. The sidewalks were still a little wet, reflecting soft morning light. Cars moved slowly along the road, and people walked past with umbrellas folded under their arms. Life in America often feels like that after a rainy night, calm, quiet, and starting again. Inside my apartment, the air felt cool. I made a simple breakfast and poured myself a cup of coffee. The smell filled the small room. 9 rejections were already behind me. 9 interviews. 9 polite emails. 9 moments when someone thanked me for my time, and then chose someone else. My mind felt tired from thinking about it. So that morning, instead of opening my laptop immediately, I decided to go outside. There was a small coffee shop about 2 blocks from my apartment. I had passed it many times before, but that day I finally walked in. The door opened with a soft bell sound. Inside, warm light filled the room. The smell of roasted coffee beans mixed with the quiet sound of people talking. A few students sat with laptops. Someone near the window was reading a book. Coffee shops in America often feel like small living rooms for the neighborhood. The barista behind the counter looked up and smiled. Good morning. What can I get for you? This time I understood the sentence immediately. I'll have a medium latte, please. Sure thing. Another familiar American phrase. She prepared the drink quickly and placed it on the counter. Here you go. Thank you, I said. I took the cup and looked around the room. Most of the tables were full, but one small table near the window had an empty chair. I sat down and placed my notebook on the table. Outside, people walked along the sidewalk. Some carried briefcases. Others walked dogs. The city was slowly waking up. For the first time in many days, I allowed myself to sit quietly without thinking about job applications. Sometimes the brain needs a short break from trying too hard. I opened my notebook and began writing simple English sentences. I live in the United States now. I am looking for a new opportunity. I will keep learning. Writing simple English helps your brain organize thoughts. When the sentences are clear, confidence grows slowly. A few minutes passed. Then I heard a voice beside me. "Hi, is this seat taken?" I looked up. A woman stood next to the table holding a coffee cup. She wore a gray coat and had a calm, friendly expression. For a second my brain searched for the right answer. Then I replied. "No, it's free." She smiled. "Great, thank you." She sat down and placed her coffee on the table. For a moment we both looked out the window. In America, strangers sometimes share a table in small cafes, especially during busy mornings. After a short silence, she glanced at my notebook. "Are you studying?" Her question was simple. "Yes," I said. "I'm practicing English." She nodded with interest. "Your English sounds good." I laughed softly. "Thank you, but I'm still learning." That was the truth. Real English conversations are often less formal than classroom English. People speak casually, use short sentences, and connect words together quickly. She introduced herself. "My name is Emily." "I'm Alex," I replied. "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too." Another small but important phrase for daily conversation. We talked for a few minutes about ordinary things. The weather. The neighborhood. The coffee shop. Then she asked a question that surprised me. "So what brought you to the United States?" For a moment I thought carefully. Then I answered honestly. "I came here for new opportunities. I'm currently looking for a job." She nodded slowly. That can be tough at the beginning. Something about the way she said it sounded understanding, not polite. I decided to share a little more. "I've had 9 interviews already," I said. "But none of them worked out." She raised her eyebrows slightly. 9? That's a lot. Yes, I admitted. 9 rejections. For a second she was quiet. Then she smiled in a thoughtful way. "You know something interesting about job searching in America?" I shook my head. "What?" "Sometimes the 10th try is the lucky one." I laughed. "That would be nice." She took a sip of coffee. "What kind of work are you looking for?" I explained my experience and the type of role I hoped to find. As I spoke, I noticed something important. I wasn't trying to sound perfect. I was simply speaking slowly and clearly. Simple sentences. Honest words. Emily listened carefully. When I finished, she nodded again. "You explain things very clearly," she said. That comment surprised me. For weeks I had been worried that my English sounded weak or slow. But maybe slow wasn't always bad. Sometimes slow means clear. Outside the cafe window, the sky had turned bright blue. Sunlight reflected on the wet street. The city looked peaceful again. After another few minutes, Emily checked the time on her phone. "Well," she said, standing up, "I need to get to work." She picked up her bag and smiled. "It was nice talking with you." "It was nice talking with you too," I replied. Before leaving, she added one more sentence. "Don't give up yet, Alex. America likes people who keep trying." Then she walked toward the door and disappeared into the bright morning. I sat there for a moment, thinking about her words. Don't give up yet. Sometimes encouragement comes from unexpected places. A stranger. A coffee shop. A short conversation. And strangely, that small moment would soon lead me toward the next step in my journey. Rejection number 10. And the interview that would change everything. Learning English from real life. After that morning in the coffee shop, something small but important changed inside me. Nothing dramatic happened right away. I didn't suddenly receive a job offer. My email inbox was still quiet most days. The same small apartment waited for me every evening. But my way of looking at things began to shift. Instead of thinking only about rejection emails, I started paying more attention to daily life around me. Because in America, daily life itself can quietly become your English teacher. The next morning I returned to the same coffee shop. Not because I expected to see Emily again. In fact, I didn't see her that day. But the place had a comfortable feeling now. Warm light. The smell of coffee. Soft conversations happening in every corner. The barista recognized me. Good morning. The usual? For a second I smiled. This was a new English phrase for me. The usual. It means the drink you normally order. Yes, I said. A latte, please. You got it. Another casual American phrase. It simply means okay or I will do that. Small expressions like that appear everywhere in everyday English. Not in textbooks. Not in grammar lessons. But in real conversations. I sat at the same table near the window and opened my notebook again. This time, instead of writing complicated sentences, I focused on simple ones. I am learning from every experience. I am improving little by little. Short sentences. Clear ideas. Outside the window, morning life continued. A man in a blue jacket walked his dog. Two students laughed while sharing a pastry. A delivery truck stopped briefly at the corner. Life in American neighborhoods often feels peaceful in the morning, before the city becomes busy. After finishing my coffee, I walked slowly back toward my apartment. Along the way, I practiced noticing English everywhere. Street signs. Shop windows. Conversations passing by. A man standing outside a bakery was talking on his phone. Yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes. That sentence caught my attention. I'll be there. A very common phrase. It means I will arrive soon. Another piece of real English added to my memory. Later that afternoon, I visited the grocery store again. Grocery stores in America are interesting places for language learners because you hear many short, natural conversations. At the checkout line, the cashier greeted the customer in front of me. Did you find everything you needed today? The customer replied casually. Yep, all good. Short. Relaxed. Natural. When it was my turn, the cashier smiled at me. How's your day going? I answered slowly but confidently. Pretty good, thank you. Glad to hear that. Another small conversation completed. It may seem simple, but every short interaction like this helps train your listening skills. English becomes less mysterious when you hear it every day. That evening, I returned home and opened my laptop. Habit brought me back to job websites. Apply. 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 The process had become almost mechanical. But something was different now. The rejections from before still existed. 9 interviews were already behind me. 9 emails that ended with, "We decided to move forward with another candidate." But instead of feeling defeated, I began to see them differently. Each interview had taught me something. In the first interview, I learned that listening carefully is more important than answering quickly. In the second interview, I learned that simple answers are often better than complicated ones. In the third interview, I realized something important. You don't need perfect English to communicate. You need clear English. That idea became my new rule. Speak slowly. Use simple words. Be honest. A few days later, I received another interview invitation. The email arrived on a quiet afternoon. Dear Alex, we would like to invite you to an interview next week. My eyes stayed on the screen for a moment. Interview number 10. The number felt strange. 10 attempts. 9 rejections already behind me. Was the 10th interview going to end the same way? Part of me expected another polite email. But another part of me remembered Emily's words in the coffee shop. Sometimes the 10th try is the lucky one. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the apartment window. The sky was turning orange as the sun slowly disappeared behind the buildings. Evening in American cities has a peaceful feeling. Lights appear one by one in apartment windows. Cars move quietly along the streets. Somewhere in the distance, someone laughed. Life continued moving forward. I closed my laptop and spoke one quiet English sentence out loud. I will do my best. Not perfect English. Not fancy English. Just real English. In that moment I didn't know whether the next interview would bring another rejection, or something completely different. But I did know one thing. I was no longer the same person who walked into interview number 1. 9 rejections had taught me patience. Daily conversations had improved my listening. And life in America had slowly become my classroom. The 10th interview was waiting. And somewhere beyond it, a completely unexpected chapter of my story was about to begin. Meeting the woman who changed my mind. The morning of the 10th interview arrived quietly. Sunlight slipped through the thin blinds in my apartment, drawing soft lines across the floor. Outside, the city was already waking up. Cars moved steadily down the street. Someone across the road was walking a dog. A delivery truck stopped briefly, its engine humming before moving on. Life in America often begins calmly like this. But inside my mind, the day felt heavier than usual. 10 interviews. 9 rejections already behind me. At some point, rejection stops feeling surprising. It becomes something you almost expect. Still, this interview felt different. Maybe it was because of the number. 10 feels like a complete number, like the end of a chapter. Or maybe it was because of something Emily had said in the coffee shop a few days earlier. Sometimes the 10th try is the lucky one. I remembered her words while getting ready. In the mirror, I adjusted my jacket and practiced a few simple English sentences. Thank you for meeting with me today. I'm excited about this opportunity. I enjoy learning new things. Practicing out loud always helped calm my nerves. Perfect grammar wasn't the goal anymore. Clear communication was. Outside, the air felt colder than the previous week. Autumn was slowly turning into early winter. The trees had lost many of their leaves, and the sidewalks were covered with thin layers of dry brown leaves. When the wind moved through the street, the leaves made a soft scratching sound. I walked toward the bus stop with a folder in my hand. Inside the folder were copies of my resume, neatly printed and carefully organized. Americans appreciate preparation, especially in professional settings. The bus arrived a few minutes later. The driver nodded as passengers stepped inside. Morning. Good morning, I replied. Short greetings like that happen everywhere in the United States. They are small, friendly signals that people acknowledge each other, even among strangers. I sat near the window and watched the city pass by. Office buildings. Small restaurants. People walking quickly with coffee cups in their hands. Morning life in American cities has its own rhythm. Everything moves forward with quiet purpose. The interview building was located in a business district downtown. Tall buildings surrounded the streets, and people crossed intersections quickly while checking their phones. Inside the lobby, everything felt bright and polished. Glass walls reflected the light from outside. The floor shone as if it had just been cleaned. A receptionist looked up when I approached the desk. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I have an interview at 10, I said. She checked the computer. "Yes, you're in the system. Please take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Again, that word. Shortly. Soon. While waiting, I noticed something interesting. Instead of feeling nervous like the first interview weeks earlier, I felt calmer. 9 interviews had already happened. 9 rejections had already arrived. At some point, experience reduces fear. A few minutes later, a man walked toward me with a friendly smile. "Hi Alex, thanks for coming in." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied. He led me into a meeting room with large windows overlooking the street. Cars moved slowly below, and sunlight filled the room. We sat down across from each other. The interview began with a familiar question. "Tell me a little about yourself." This time I didn't rush my answer. I spoke slowly. "My name is Alex. I recently moved to the United States, and I'm excited to continue building my career here." The words felt natural. He nodded. "Great. And what kind of work environment do you enjoy?" Another common question. I paused briefly before answering. "I enjoy teamwork," I said. "And I like environments where people support each other." The interviewer wrote something on his notepad. Then he asked something unexpected. "What has been the biggest challenge since you moved here?" For a moment, I thought carefully. Then I answered honestly. Understanding fast English at first, I admitted with a small smile. "But I'm improving every day." He laughed softly. "That's normal. Even native speakers sometimes struggle with fast conversations." That moment made the room feel more relaxed. The interview continued for about 20 minutes. We discussed my previous work, my goals, and the type of projects the company handled. Throughout the conversation, I followed the rule I had learned after 9 rejections. Speak clearly. Use simple sentences. Stay honest. When the interview finished, he stood up and shook my hand. "Thank you for coming in today." "Thank you for your time," I replied. Walking out of the building, I felt something unusual. Peace. Not confidence. Not excitement. Just calm acceptance. Maybe I would receive the job. Maybe I would receive rejection number 10. Either way, I had done my best. Outside, the afternoon sky had turned bright blue. People were sitting at outdoor tables near restaurants, talking and laughing. A man played music softly on a guitar near the corner. American cities sometimes feel like quiet stages where thousands of small stories happen at the same time. As I walked back toward the bus stop, my phone vibrated. A new message appeared. From Emily. We had exchanged phone numbers the day we met at the coffee shop. The message was simple. "How did the interview go?" I smiled slightly and typed a short reply. "It went well, I think." Her response came quickly. "That's good. Remember what I said. The 10th one might be the lucky one." Standing there on the sidewalk, holding my phone, I suddenly realized something important. Sometimes the people who help change your life are not interviewers. Not bosses. Not recruiters. Sometimes it's simply someone who believes in you at the right moment. And in the days ahead, Emily would become much more than just a friendly stranger from a coffee shop. She would become the person who helped me understand America and believe in my own future here. But first, one more moment was waiting. The email. The answer to interview number 10. Rejection number 10. 3 days after the 10th interview, the city woke up under a gray sky. The kind of sky that feels quiet and thoughtful, like the day itself is waiting for something to happen. From my apartment window, the street looked calm. A bus stopped at the corner. A woman walked her dog across the crosswalk. Somewhere nearby, the smell of fresh bread drifted from a small bakery. Morning life in America can be surprisingly peaceful. But inside my apartment, my mind was restless. Because I was waiting. Waiting for the email. When you have already experienced 9 rejections, the 10th response becomes something strange. You try not to think about it, but at the same time, it sits quietly in the back of your mind. I made coffee and sat at the small desk near the window. My laptop was open. The email inbox stared back at me like a silent question. Nothing new yet. So I decided not to wait in silence. Waiting can make time feel very slow. Instead, I opened my notebook and began writing simple English sentences again. I will keep improving. I will keep trying. Short sentences. Clear thoughts. Outside, the city slowly became busier. Cars passed more frequently. People walked quickly along the sidewalks, holding their morning coffee cups. After a few minutes, I decided to go for a walk. Walking had become my quiet therapy during these months in America. The air felt cold but fresh. Autumn was almost finished, and the first hints of winter were arriving. Trees stood almost empty now, their branches thin against the pale sky. I passed the small coffee shop where I had met Emily. Through the window, I could see people sitting inside, talking softly while steam rose from their cups. Coffee shops in America often feel like warm islands during cold mornings. For a moment, I thought about going inside. But instead, I kept walking. Sometimes movement helps your mind breathe. At the corner of the street, a man standing outside a convenience store spoke loudly into his phone. Yeah, I just got the email. That sentence caught my attention. I just got the email. Such a simple phrase, but suddenly it made my heart beat faster. Because that was exactly what I was waiting for. I continued walking slowly, repeating the phrase quietly to myself. I just got the email. Listening to real English around you is one of the best ways to learn. Natural sentences appear everywhere in daily life. After about 20 minutes, I returned to my apartment. The room felt quiet again. I sat down at the desk and looked at the laptop screen. One new message. My stomach tightened slightly. The sender was the company from interview number 10. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the subject line. Then I opened it. Dear Alex. Thank you again for taking the time to meet with our team earlier this week. The first sentence looked exactly like the beginning of every other rejection email. My shoulders slowly dropped. I continued reading. We enjoyed learning about your experience and appreciated your thoughtful answers during the interview. Another familiar line. At this point, my mind already knew what was coming. Still, I read the final sentence. However, we have decided to move forward with another candidate. Rejection number 10. For a moment, the room felt completely silent. 10 interviews. 10 polite emails. 10 times someone thanked me for my interest and then chose someone else. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. The sky was still gray. Cars moved quietly along the street below. Life outside continued as if nothing important had happened. And maybe that was the strange part. For the first few rejections, disappointment felt sharp. But by the 10th rejection, something inside me felt different. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a quiet question. What now? I closed the laptop slowly. For a long moment, I sat there thinking about the past few months. 9 interviews before this one. 9 times preparing carefully. 9 times walking into offices with hope. 9 times shaking hands and hearing the same polite goodbye. Now 10. Somewhere during that journey, something else had quietly happened. My English had improved. My listening had become faster. My answers during interviews had become clearer. The rejections had not been wasted. Just then, my phone vibrated. A message from Emily. How are you doing today? For a second, I considered what to say. Then I typed honestly. I just received the email. A few seconds passed. Her reply appeared. And? I looked at the screen and smiled slightly. Rejection number 10. There was a pause before the next message arrived. Then she wrote something simple. Want to get coffee? I stared at the message for a moment. Coffee. Conversation. A short break from thinking about interviews. Sometimes life doesn't change with dramatic events. Sometimes it changes with small invitations. I typed a reply. Sure. See you soon. As I stood up and grabbed my jacket, something unexpected happened. For the first time after receiving a rejection email, I didn't feel defeated. Because somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice was saying something new. Maybe the story wasn't ending. Maybe it was just beginning in a different way. And strangely enough, the path toward my dream job would not begin with another interview, but with a simple conversation over coffee. The interview I almost skipped. The morning after rejection number 10 felt strangely calm. Not hopeful. Not dramatic. Just calm. Sometimes, when you expect something difficult and it finally happens, your mind becomes quiet instead of emotional. Outside my apartment window, the city looked exactly the same as every other morning. A bus stopped at the corner. A cyclist rode slowly down the street. The bakery across the road opened its door, and warm yellow light spread onto the sidewalk. Life in America rarely pauses for anyone's personal disappointment. People still go to work. Coffee shops still open. Dogs still need to be walked. And somehow that normal rhythm can feel comforting. I sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my notebook. The steam rose slowly from the cup while sunlight moved across the table. 10 rejections. If someone had told me months earlier that I would hear no 10 times in a row, I might have felt discouraged before even starting. But something interesting had happened during those months. The rejections had slowly changed my relationship with fear. During my first interview, my hands had been slightly shaking. By interview number 5, I was still nervous, but I could answer questions more clearly. By interview number 9, something unexpected had happened. I had stopped trying to sound perfect. Instead, I simply spoke. Real English. Slow English. Honest English. While thinking about all this, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from Emily. Coffee today? I smiled. Sure, I replied. We met again at the same small cafe where we first talked. The bell above the door rang softly when I entered. The familiar smell of coffee filled the air. People sat with laptops, headphones, books, each person quietly living their own story. Emily waved from a table near the window. Hey, she said when I sat down. Hey. She studied my face for a moment. You look calmer than I expected. I laughed softly. I think I ran out of energy for disappointment. She nodded thoughtfully. That happens. The barista walked by our table. Can I get you anything? I answered automatically. A latte, please. Coming right up. Emily stirred her coffee slowly. So, what's your next step? I looked out the window for a moment before answering. I'm not sure, I admitted. 10 interviews had already happened. 10 doors had closed. For the first time, I didn't have a clear plan. Emily leaned back in her chair. Can I tell you something interesting about job searching in the US? Sure. Sometimes the opportunity you want doesn't come through applications. I looked at her, curious. What do you mean? She smiled slightly. Sometimes it comes through people. Networking. That word appears often in American professional culture. It simply means building relationships and conversations that connect people. Emily continued. My company is actually hiring right now. My eyebrows lifted slightly. Oh. It's a small team, she said. We work on community projects and digital tools. I listened carefully. The way she described the work sounded interesting, and surprisingly similar to the roles I had been applying for. Would you be interested in meeting my manager? She asked. For a moment, I didn't answer. 10 rejections had made my expectations very careful. I don't want to cause trouble, I said slowly. She shook her head. It's not trouble. It's just a conversation. A conversation. Not an interview. That felt different. She continued. I told him about you yesterday. He said something simple. What? Tell him to stop by tomorrow. I blinked. That's it? Emily laughed. Sometimes opportunities start very casually in America. No long application. No formal process yet. Just a conversation. Still, a small voice inside my mind hesitated. 10 rejections create a quiet doubt that stays in the background. What if they don't like my English? I asked. Emily looked directly at me. Alex, you know something interesting? What? You explain things very clearly. That sentence felt strangely familiar. She had said something similar during our first coffee conversation. You don't try to sound fancy, she continued. You just speak honestly. I thought about that for a moment. For months I had worried that my English was not advanced enough. But maybe clear communication mattered more than complicated words. Emily finished her coffee and checked the time. So, she said, standing up, will you stop by tomorrow? I took a slow breath. Okay. She smiled. Good. Outside the cafe, the afternoon sun had finally broken through the clouds. The wet streets from yesterday's rain now reflected bright light. People walked past with relaxed expressions. A man played guitar near the corner. A group of students laughed while crossing the street. American cities often feel like quiet stages where thousands of small decisions shape the future. That evening, back in my apartment, I prepared for the next day. Not an official interview. Just a conversation. Still, I practiced a few simple English sentences again. Thank you for meeting with me. I enjoy working with teams. I like solving problems. Clear. Slow. Honest. Before going to sleep, one thought crossed my mind. If Emily had not sat at my table in that coffee shop. If I had skipped that cafe that morning. If we had never started that simple conversation. The next day might never happen. And the opportunity waiting there might remain invisible. Sometimes the door that changes your life is not the one you knock on. Sometimes it's the one someone quietly opens for you. And tomorrow, I would finally walk through it. The conversation that changed everything. The next morning arrived quietly. No dramatic sunrise. No sudden inspiration. Just another ordinary American morning. Outside the apartment window, the sky was pale gray. A delivery truck stopped across the street. Someone walked a golden retriever along the sidewalk. The city moved with its usual steady rhythm. In America, even the days that change your life often begin like this, simple and quiet. I stood in the kitchen making coffee. The familiar sound of the coffee machine filled the small apartment. Steam slowly rose from the mug while I looked at my notebook on the table. 10 rejections. For a moment, I let that number sit in my mind. Strangely, it didn't feel heavy anymore. Each rejection had been difficult at the time. But together, they had slowly built something unexpected: experience. Experience with interviews. Experience with speaking English under pressure. Experience with staying calm even when the answer might be no. I took a sip of coffee and practiced a few simple sentences again. Good morning. Nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to talk. I enjoy solving problems and learning new things. Simple sentences. Real English. Not perfect English. But clear English. At 9:30 a.m., I left the apartment and walked toward the subway station. The air was cool and fresh. A few leaves moved across the sidewalk in the light wind. People walked quickly, holding coffee cups and backpacks. Morning life in American cities often feels like a quiet river of movement. Everyone going somewhere. Everyone with their own plans. Inside the subway train, I found a seat near the door. Across from me, a young woman typed quickly on her laptop. A construction worker leaned against the pole, listening to music. Two students discussed homework in low voices. The train moved through the tunnel with a steady metallic sound. I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark subway window. You've already done 10 interviews, I whispered quietly to myself. This is just a conversation. 20 minutes later, I arrived at Emily's office building. It wasn't a huge corporate tower. Instead, it was a mid-sized brick building on a lively street. On the ground floor, there was a small bakery and a bookstore. People sat outside drinking coffee and talking. The atmosphere felt relaxed. Creative. Human. I walked inside and rode the elevator to the 4th floor. When the elevator doors opened, I saw a simple sign. Community Labs. Emily was already waiting near the entrance. Hey, she said with a friendly smile. Hey. You made it. I did. She laughed. Good. My manager is free now. My heartbeat sped up slightly. Emily led me down a hallway filled with natural light. The office space was open and modern. People worked at long wooden tables. Some talked quietly. Others typed on laptops while listening to music through headphones. The environment felt very different from the formal corporate offices I had visited during previous interviews. Less rigid. More collaborative. Emily knocked gently on a glass door. Come in, a voice said. Inside the room sat a man in his early 40s with short brown hair and a relaxed expression. A whiteboard behind him was covered with sketches and project ideas. He stood up and extended his hand. Hi, you must be Alex. Yes, I said, shaking his hand. Nice to meet you. I'm Daniel. His voice was calm and friendly. Emily told me a little about you. We sat down at a small round table. Not a large interview desk. Just 3 chairs and a simple table. Immediately, the conversation felt different from my previous interviews. Daniel leaned back slightly. So, he said, tell me about your journey to the US. The question surprised me. It wasn't about technical skills. It wasn't about experience. It was about my story. I spoke slowly. I came here about a year ago. At first everything felt new, the language, the culture, the work environment. Daniel nodded. That's a big adjustment. Yes, I said with a small smile. But I've learned a lot. What kind of work are you hoping to do? I enjoy working on projects that help people solve everyday problems. Daniel glanced at Emily. That sounds familiar. She smiled. That's basically our mission. For the next 30 minutes, the conversation continued naturally. Daniel asked simple questions. What projects have you enjoyed most? How do you approach learning something new? What kind of team environment helps you do your best work? The atmosphere felt relaxed. More like a thoughtful conversation than a formal interview. At one point, Daniel asked something unexpected. How many interviews have you had so far? I hesitated slightly before answering. 10. His eyebrows lifted. 10? Yes. And none worked out? I shook my head. Not yet. For a moment, he looked thoughtful. Then he said something I didn't expect. That's actually impressive. I blinked. Impressive? He nodded. Most people give up after 3 or 4 rejections. Emily smiled quietly. Daniel continued. But 10 interviews means you kept showing up. He tapped the table lightly. That tells me something important. What? I asked. Resilience. The word hung in the air for a moment. Resilience. The ability to keep going. Even when things are difficult. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Skills can be learned, he said. But resilience is harder to teach. For the first time that morning, I felt a small wave of relief. The 10 rejections suddenly felt different. Not like failures. But like proof that I hadn't stopped trying. Daniel glanced at Emily again. Then he turned back to me. Well, he said with a relaxed smile, how would you feel about working with us for a few weeks on a trial project? My brain needed a moment to process the sentence. A trial project? Yes, he said. Nothing too formal yet. Just a chance to see how we work together. I felt my shoulders relax. After 10 doors closing, one door had finally opened. Not a huge dramatic door. Just a simple opportunity. But sometimes that's exactly how new chapters begin. Quietly. Naturally. With one honest conversation. Daniel stood up and extended his hand again. Welcome to Community Labs, Alex. As we shook hands, one thought passed through my mind. Maybe those 10 rejections weren't delays after all. Maybe they were simply guiding me toward the place where I truly belonged. And this time, the answer was finally yes. The first week. The following Monday arrived faster than expected. For the first time in many months, I woke up with a different feeling. Not anxiety. Not uncertainty. Responsibility. Outside my apartment window, the early morning sky was still pale blue. The street below looked quiet except for a few commuters walking quickly toward the bus stop. Life in American cities begins early. Coffee shops open before sunrise. Subway trains start running while the sky is still dark. People step into the day with quiet determination. I stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Just toast. Eggs. And a cup of coffee. Simple. But that morning felt different. Because I had somewhere to go. Somewhere that expected me to arrive. Before leaving, I practiced a few small English phrases out loud while putting on my jacket. Good morning. How's your day going? Let me know if I can help. Real English. The kind of everyday conversation that fills offices, cafes, and hallways across America. Sometimes learning a language isn't about complicated grammar. It's about learning how people greet each other, how they ask small questions, how they share tiny moments during the day. At 8:40 a.m., I stepped onto the subway. The train was busier than usual. Office workers stood shoulder to shoulder, holding coffee cups and phones. Across from me, a man read the morning news on a tablet. 2 college students discussed a project quietly. The train moved steadily through the tunnels, stopping every few minutes. I looked at the small reflection of my face in the subway window. First day, I said quietly. When I arrived at Community Labs, the bakery downstairs was already full. The smell of fresh bread floated through the entrance. People sat at small tables with laptops, discussing projects or answering emails. This was something I had slowly noticed about American work culture. Work doesn't always happen inside traditional offices. Sometimes it happens in cafes, public spaces, parks, or shared studios. Ideas move freely between places. Upstairs, the office was already alive with quiet activity. Emily waved when she saw me. "Morning." "Good morning," I replied. "How was the commute?" "Pretty smooth." She smiled. "You're officially early." I looked at the clock. 8:55 a.m. "Is that good?" I asked. "In America," she said with a laugh, 5 minutes early is usually perfect. We walked toward the main workspace together. Several team members sat around a large wooden table discussing something on a laptop screen. Emily introduced me. "Everyone, this is Alex." A few people turned and smiled. "Hey. Nice to meet you." "Welcome." The greetings were casual and friendly. Nothing formal. Just quick human moments. Emily pointed toward an empty desk near the window. "That's your spot for the trial project." The desk was simple, a laptop, a notebook, and a small desk lamp. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room. For a moment, I just stood there looking at the space. After months of uncertainty, this desk represented something real. Something earned. Daniel walked over a few minutes later. "Morning, Alex." "Good morning. Ready for your first week?" "I think so." He smiled. "That's the right answer." Daniel gathered the team around the table for a short morning meeting. This was another common habit in many American workplaces. Short daily meetings to align everyone's work. "All right, quick updates," Daniel said. People took turns sharing brief progress reports. "Working on the user interface today." "Meeting with the community partners this afternoon." "Testing the mobile version." The conversation moved quickly but clearly. Then Daniel turned toward me. "Alex, want to tell everyone what you'll be exploring this week?" 10 pairs of eyes looked in my direction. My heart beat slightly faster. But this time, something felt different. Instead of fear, I felt prepared. I spoke slowly and clearly. "I'll be helping research how people use the community platform," I said. "I want to understand what works well and what could be improved." A few team members nodded. "Sounds useful." "Yeah, we need that data." Daniel smiled. "Perfect." The meeting ended in less than 10 minutes. Then the office returned to its quiet rhythm. Keyboard sounds. Soft conversations. The occasional laugh from across the room. I opened the laptop and began reviewing the platform Daniel had mentioned. At first, the information felt overwhelming. Different tools. User reports. Feedback messages. But Emily rolled her chair next to mine. "First week tip," she said. "What's that?" "Don't try to understand everything at once." That sounded familiar. It was similar to learning English. One conversation at a time. One phrase at a time. One small improvement each day. Later that afternoon, I walked to the bakery downstairs to grab coffee. Standing in line, I overheard 2 coworkers talking behind me. "Did you finish the draft?" "Almost. I'll send it later today." "Cool." Real English again. Short sentences. Relaxed tone. The kind of language that textbooks rarely teach but real life uses constantly. When I returned upstairs, Daniel stopped by my desk. "How's the first day going?" "Good," I said. "I'm learning a lot." "That's the goal." He looked at the screen for a moment. "Remember," he added, "you're not here to know everything." "What am I here for?" He smiled slightly. "To stay curious." Curiosity. That word stayed with me for the rest of the afternoon. Because when I thought back to the past months, the interviews, the rejections, the uncertainty, curiosity had quietly guided every step. Curiosity about language. Curiosity about people. Curiosity about new opportunities. By the time the sun began setting outside the office windows, I had filled several pages in my notebook. Observations. Ideas. Questions. Nothing perfect. But progress. When I packed my bag and stepped outside, the street was glowing with warm evening light. People walked home. Restaurants opened their doors. The bakery displayed fresh pastries in the window. Another normal American evening. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't just watching life move around me. I was part of it. And tomorrow, the story would continue. Learning the rhythm. By the middle of the week, something interesting began to happen. The office no longer felt unfamiliar. On Monday, every sound had seemed new. Every conversation felt like something I needed to carefully observe. But by Wednesday morning, the rhythm of community labs had slowly become familiar. The same coffee machine humming in the kitchen area. The same sunlight entering through the tall windows. The same quiet mix of keyboard sounds, low conversations, and occasional laughter. Workplaces in America often develop their own rhythm, a unique atmosphere shaped by the people inside. And little by little, I was learning this one. That morning, I arrived slightly earlier than usual. 8:30 a.m. The office was almost empty. Only Daniel sat at the large table near the whiteboard, reviewing something on his laptop. He looked up when I walked in. "Morning, Alex." "Good morning. You're early again." I smiled. "I'm still learning the schedule." Daniel closed his laptop halfway. "Want some coffee?" "Sure." We walked together to the small kitchen area. The coffee machine made a soft grinding sound while the smell of fresh beans filled the room. Daniel poured 2 cups. "First week treating you okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "There's a lot to learn, but it's interesting." "That's a good sign." He leaned against the counter casually. "What's been the most surprising part so far?" I thought about the question. "Probably how open the conversations are," I said. Daniel nodded. "What do you mean?" In some of my previous interviews, I explained everything felt very formal. Very structured. And here? Here people just talk. Daniel laughed softly. "That's intentional." He took a sip of coffee. "We believe good ideas usually come from relaxed conversations." That idea reminded me of something I had noticed during the past few days. People often stopped by each other's desks just to ask quick questions. "Hey, what do you think about this? Can you look at this for a second? Does this make sense?" Short conversations. Simple language. Real English. Not the complicated sentences I had studied in textbooks for years. Daniel finished his coffee. "All right," he said. "Let's see what you discovered yesterday." We walked back to the main table where my notes were waiting. Over the past 2 days, I had been reading feedback from users of the community platform. Hundreds of small comments. Some positive. Some critical. Some just simple suggestions. Daniel looked through my notes. "You organized this nicely," he said. "Thanks. What patterns do you see?" I explained slowly. "Many users like the idea of the platform," I said, "but some people say it feels slightly confusing at the beginning." Daniel nodded. "That's helpful." He pointed to one of the notes. "And this?" "That comment appears several times," I said. "New users aren't always sure where to start." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Interesting." For the next 20 minutes, we discussed possible improvements. The conversation moved naturally between ideas. Emily joined us halfway through. "Morning strategy session," she joked. "Something like that," Daniel replied. She looked at my notebook. Wow, you've been busy. I like observing things, I said. That's a great skill, she replied. Then she added something interesting. You know, the first week at a new job is mostly about watching and listening. That sentence felt important. Watching. Listening. Understanding the environment. Those skills were similar to learning a new language. You observe how people speak. You notice their tone. You learn the rhythm of conversations. Later that afternoon, something small but meaningful happened. I was working at my desk when one of the team members, Marcus, stopped by. Hey Alex, he said. Hey. He pointed at the screen. What are you working on? User feedback analysis, I replied. He pulled a chair closer. Mind if I take a look? Of course. Marcus studied the notes quietly. After a moment he nodded. This is actually really helpful. Really? Yeah, he said. We've been moving so fast lately that we didn't stop to organize this information properly. He tapped one of the sections. This part especially. I felt a small sense of accomplishment. Not because the work was perfect, but because it was useful. Marcus stood up. Nice work, he said. Thanks. Then he added something casually as he walked away. By the way, your English is really clear. I looked up. Thank you. That comment reminded me of the many moments in the past when I had worried about my English. Would people understand me? Would I make mistakes? But in real life, communication often works differently. People don't expect perfection. They simply appreciate clarity. That evening, as the office slowly emptied, I stayed a little longer to finish organizing the research notes. Outside the window, the sky turned orange and pink. Cars moved slowly through the streets below. Inside the office, the atmosphere became quieter. Emily packed her bag and walked past my desk. You heading out soon? She asked. Just finishing this section. She glanced at the screen. You've made a lot of progress this week. I'm trying. She smiled. You're doing more than trying. When I finally left the building, the evening air felt cool and refreshing. The bakery downstairs was closing for the day. A worker wiped the last table while another locked the front door. I began walking toward the subway station. City lights flickered on along the street. Restaurants filled with people talking and laughing. Life continued moving in its usual rhythm. But as I walked, one quiet realization stayed with me. A few months ago, I had been sitting alone in my apartment after yet another rejection email. 9 interviews. 10 interviews. So many no answers. At that time, it had been easy to believe those rejections meant something permanent. But standing there now, under the warm glow of streetlights, I understood something different. Those rejections had simply been part of the path. Each one had pushed me forward. Each one had prepared me a little more. Until finally. One conversation. One opportunity. One open door. And now, step by step, a new chapter was slowly beginning. If you look back at the beginning of this story, everything seemed uncertain. A new country. A new language. A long list of job applications. And 9 rejections. Actually, 10. Each no arrived quietly. Usually in a short email. Thank you for your time. We decided to move forward with other candidates. We wish you the best in your job search. At first, those messages felt heavy. Not dramatic. Just heavy. Because rejection doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply sits in the room with you while you stare at your laptop screen. But here is the strange truth that many people discover later in life. Rejection often looks like the end, when in reality it is simply part of the direction. Think about it for a moment. If even one of those earlier interviews had worked out, the story would have gone somewhere else. A different office. A different team. A completely different path. And maybe I would never have walked into that small cafe. Maybe Emily would never have sat at my table. Maybe Daniel would never have asked that simple question. Tell me about your journey. Life rarely moves in straight lines. It moves in conversations. In small decisions. In random mornings when you almost decide to stay home, but don't. That's something people often notice about life in the United States. Opportunities appear in unexpected places. A coffee shop. A subway conversation. A casual introduction between two coworkers. Not every door opens because of a perfect resume. Sometimes a door opens because someone sees curiosity. Or persistence. Or the simple willingness to keep showing up. And that might be the quiet lesson behind those 9 rejections. Not failure. Practice. Each interview was a rehearsal for the conversation that finally mattered. Each uncomfortable moment improved a small skill. Speaking more clearly. Listening more carefully. Explaining ideas more simply. Real English. Real communication. The kind that doesn't try to sound impressive. The kind that simply tries to be understood. Looking back now, something else becomes clear. Success rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It grows slowly in ordinary days. Waking up early. Practicing one sentence at a time. Showing up for one more opportunity. Even when you're not sure it will work. Because often, the moment that changes everything doesn't look special at first. It looks like just another conversation. Just another day. Just another cup of coffee. And that is exactly what makes it powerful. Somewhere out there right now, someone is also sending job applications. Someone is practicing English late at night. Someone is hearing another no and wondering if it's worth continuing. Maybe that person is you. If it is, remember this simple idea. 9 rejections do not define your story. They simply mean the story is still moving. The next conversation might change everything. The next opportunity might already be closer than you think. Sometimes the door you are searching for is only one conversation away. And who knows? Maybe the next chapter of this journey is already beginning somewhere else. A new challenge. A new opportunity. A new unexpected meeting. But that is a story for another day. Before you go, if this story made you think, smile, or feel a little more hopeful about your own journey, make sure you stay connected with this channel. Because every week we share new slow storytelling episodes designed to help you improve your real English listening, learn natural spoken English phrases, experience authentic American life stories, all while enjoying calm, engaging stories you can follow easily. So if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment below. What was the hardest rejection you ever faced? Your story might inspire someone else who is still trying. And if you're curious about what happens next in Alex's journey, the next story might surprise you. See you in the next episode.